Hello, this is a training class for QLive.
Are you
Metropolis
ready for some
real-time
QLive?
Wallboard
Yes!
reporting solution
Yes!
for your PBX or Unified
Yes!
Communication System.
Yes!
First of all, thank you for purchasing QLive. Hopefully you've gone through the installation process and you're getting ready to start using QLive. If not, maybe you're preparing for installation and curious, how am I going to assign my supervisors, my administrators, and make best use out of the software? Regardless, you're in a good place. Today, we're going to be discussing the administration user permission. We're also going to be discussing supervisor, wallboard, agent, and maintenance, as well as how to get in touch with Metropolis support should you need assistance, and how to register for ongoing trainings. Maybe you have a new hire or a new supervisor, and you want them to become acclimated with how you use the software. So, you've gone through the installation and you're wondering, hey, how do I get access to QLive? Well, it's very simple. First, you have to understand where QLive resides. Likely it's on a PC or a server or a virtual machine. You will need to know the IP address of that machine in order to gain access to QLive. As a user, you're simply going to enter in that IP address. Maybe it's 10.252.251.101. And then by default, we use port 500. Right? To enter a port number, you use a :500. So if this were the IP address where QLive resides, you would simply press enter and you would see a screen identical to what I'm showing here. If you're not seeing that screen, likely you need to start the QLive services, all right, which we'll discuss later, or you can always contact Metropolis support. So by default, Metropolis sets up a default administrator. That administrator user permission is admin in all lowercase and a password of 2222, so 4 2s. As soon as I click login, I have access to QLive from my browser. Because I'm logged in as an administrator, I can show all the different permission types of QLive from the supervisor, wallboard, and agent. First thing that you're going to want to do after QLive is installed is set up your different users. We try to make this as intuitive as possible, where you just simply go to Setup and Users. You'll notice that I have 5 different users assigned in QLive. You can set up as many of them as you'd like, and they have various permission types. For example, as an admin with the admin222 password, I have assigned administrative permission, administrator that is, and then I have assigned all of the groups now. So this supervisor or administrator now has the ability to see all groups and dashboards. All right. This second user here is a wallboard user. What does a wallboard user mean? Well, wallboard is meant to display large information on a monitor or a projection screen, likely that you have throughout the office or in your different locations. And again, it's just another way that you can log into QLive from a browser. All right. There's also a user permission type of supervisor. Notice that I set up a supervisor called Sales Supervisor. You could assign whatever name that you wanted to the supervisor. I just assigned it as Sales to make this easy. And then I chose Supervisor as the permission type. And then this supervisor is only monitoring the sales group. So when he or she logs in, they're not able to see any agents outside of the sales group. There's also an agent permission type. Right? So I set up Clark Kent as an agent. Right? So Clark Kent has a unique ID and password. You'll notice that I had chosen agent. After you choose agent, you can select the group. So Clark Kent is in the sales group, and he is C. Kent. All right, so now Clark Kent is set up for use of QLive. All right, you could set up multiple admins, and hopefully you noticed that you can get very granular on what you want a wallboard user to see or supervisor to see when logging in. All right, so maybe you have a location spread out throughout the country or the world, and you want to provide least privilege access to that supervisor to where they're just monitoring the sales group. That's what I was displaying here. You can also see their login and log out activity. I know sometimes this is important from an audit perspective. What times of the day is my supervisor or admin logging in? And I can see here several times. Okay. There's also the ability to import a list of your users via a CSV file. All right, so if you have many different users that you want to import instead of manually add them, we can do so as well. The next thing that you're going to want to do in the setup options is go to settings. All right, so settings, it's very important to configure, especially on initial implementation, so your dashboards and wallboards reflect data that's pertinent to your call center or to your business. So you'll notice the first criteria here is SLA, so service level adherence. Are you wanting to set this up to maybe the default of 20 seconds or maybe 15 seconds? So this is stating if a call were to ring more than 20 seconds, it falls outside of our SLA. All right. Call type displayed in dashboards and wallboards. So what kind of call types are available? Maybe you want all, meaning inbound and outbound and internal. Or maybe you want just outbound calls to display in the dashboard because you're just running an outbound call center. Or maybe you want to display inbound and outbound. Maybe you just want to display calls that are coming in from a hunt group or to a group only. All right, so there's several different ways that you can define what data is relevant in the dashboards. This does not affect reporting. All right, so regardless if I chose just report on all types of inbound calls or all calls that only went through a hunt group or a hunt pilot, I would be able to just see all call types from within the reports. All right. Most customers have this set up as all, or a lot of them have it set up as inbound through the group only because they're using QLive as an informal call center where the hunt group or the hunt pilot is acting like a queue, and you want to just report on calls coming in through those hunt pilots and queues from the dashboard and wallboard perspective. In that case, you would set this to inbound via group only. All right. Use embedded email, meaning you're going to use the embedded SMTP server of QLive. All right. You can set up automatic backup options of the database. All right. You can also define internal calls to the hunt group. That's what HG stands for, as incoming calls. So when would that be an appropriate setting for your business? Maybe you have a receptionist or an operator that is accepting all inbound calls. And that operator is transferring or making an internal call to a hunt group, and you want those to look like incoming calls from the dashboard perspective. Right? That can be really important because maybe those aren't really internal calls, right? They're customers that are calling in, speaking with the operator, and then transferred to a hunt group, and then one of your agents or one of your users is answering a call, or hopefully answering the call within that hunt group. There's also something called mirroring internal calls for reporting. What does mirroring mean? Mirroring means it's going to show as an outbound call from the extension that placed the internal call, so outbound internal, and also an internal call from the receiving party on an internal call from an internal extension. All right, so it can be very useful not only showing the outbound activity, but the inbound activity on an internal call by enabling this mirroring option. DNIS numbers. Okay, so first off, what is a DNIS? Right? DNIS number is maybe a main telephone number that you have for your business. Maybe it's a number that's associated to a branch or to a location. Usually this is either a toll-free number or a 10-digit DID. If you want to report on DNISs, notice we try and make this easy. Separate them by a comma. what is this offsite number? Offsite number is used in QLive when a call were to reach a hunt group, and through the call traffic or through the different hold times, the call is eventually transferred to a DID. Maybe that's an answering service that you have. Maybe it's another call center or another product that you have. A lot of times customers will have QLive at a branch location, and after a certain amount of seconds, calls will overflow to the offsite number, which is their contact center. Or a lot of customers, maybe it's a law firm, and you're paying a lot of money for these inbound leads that are coming in, and you want to make sure that you're going to answer every single call that's coming in. And if you can't, you're going to send that to an offsite answering service, which would be this offsite number here. So if you have multiple offsite numbers, you would just separate them by comma, very similar to the DNIS report, or the DNIS numbers here. Something beautiful about QLive is you can define what an abandoned phone call is, right? A lot of PBXs do that for you, but they don't do it very well, right? They're going to class every call that's disconnected as an abandoned call, or they're going to class an abandoned call as a call that goes to an offsite number when maybe you don't want to class that as an abandoned call. Maybe you want to get more specific in the meaning of an abandoned call. Here's where you can set that up. So let's go through the different options that are available. Ringing. Ringing means a call rang directly to an agent, and the agent did not answer the call. All right, so the customer hung up in the ringing status on a direct call to an agent. The next status here, or the next type of abandoned phone call, would be based off of hunt ringing. So what is hunt ringing? Well, a hunt group or a hunt pilot is a way to distribute calls to a group of users, extensions, or agents in this case. All right, so if a call were to ring that hunt group and no one were to answer that call in the hunt group, we're going to classify that as an abandoned if you put a checkbox here on hunt ringing. Maybe you also want to include voicemail calls as abandoned. What do I mean by voicemail? Well, that would be a call that goes either directly to a user's voicemail, so they don't answer the call, goes to voicemail. You want that to class as abandoned. Or maybe in your hunt group configuration or hunt pilot configuration, after a certain amount of seconds or overflows, you want that call to go to voicemail, and then you're following up on those voicemails. All right, what is a queue? There are several different types of queues depending on your PBX. Maybe it's a queue for a native queue. A lot of PBXs will act like a call center queue where you can broadcast maybe a message to someone while they're waiting for the call to be answered by a user within the group. So again, that can be a very nice feature to take advantage of. Just another way to distribute calls to users within a group. There's also auto attendant. So what is auto attendant? Well, when you call into your business, or a lot of businesses, you're going through the auto attendant where there's a specific set of key presses or IVR or DTMF presses in order to route to a specific hunt group, or route to, for example, get directions for your business, or route to an off-site telephone number, or route to the directory, right? How do you want to class an abandoned phone call? Do you want those calls that are hung up in the auto attendant to class as abandoned? If so, you would leave that checkbox enabled. There's other use cases here as well, like holding. A lot of times a user or an agent will avoid abandoned phone calls by answering the call and then putting the customer on hold, and then the customer hangs up the phone because they've been waiting on hold. Well, that's not a good way to avoid abandoned phone calls. Maybe you want that to class as an abandoned phone call as well. Or maybe you want it to be a transfer hold, Right? QLive gives you the intelligence to see which users or agents are on the phone. So if you're going to transfer the call to another agent and that agent were to not answer the call, that could be considered a transferred hold and an abandoned call. So as you'll see, there's a lot of flexibility in defining what is important for you to determine an abandoned call or your business, right? You'll notice there's also checkboxes here to include internal calls as abandoned. So an internal call, meaning again an extension to extension or agent to agent dial. Right? Should you class those as abandoned, or maybe you don't care about those being an abandoned? So I'm going to remove the checkbox so internal calls are never classed as abandoned. Do I want to include calls that were answered? No, I don't want to include calls that were answered in my abandoned call definition. So again, some settings that are very important to configure upon initial implementation. So you're not contacting Metropolis like, oh my gosh, why do I have so many abandoned phone calls? Maybe I need to, you don't want to make any decisions unless you've actually gone through the configuration of QLive and have an understanding of what an abandoned phone call is and how you want to define it before depending on the data. So again, very important. Let's set this up immediately. All right. The next thing that you're going to want to do is under PBX options, this would be something that Metropolis went through during initial implementation. All right, just so you have an idea on how it works. There are several different PBX types that we work with, and maybe it's Avaya, maybe it's Cisco. Depending on the site, maybe it's a multi-site and multi-PBX environment. We're going to, for example, on a CUCM or a Cisco Call Manager, we're going to be providing a site name, the IP address of the publisher. The user ID would be the application user permission. All right, so whatever application user that has Axle permissions, which is part of the installation checklist, and then the password there for that application user. And then very important to enter in the CUCM version. All right, if you have questions on how to configure the PBX for QLive to operate, and very important, contact Metropolis support. There's going to be some other components, such as maybe a TAPI driver or possibly other connections that you need to take into consideration when we did the implementation. So this isn't the only connection to the PBX. Right? There could be several other connections to the PBX depending on what PBX you have and what features you're using. As soon as I set up all those configuration options or parameters, I'm going to activate that site or that PBX. And then I will click Save. All right. So immediately click Save so it's stored in the database. The next step, depending on your PBX make and model, maybe this is a Cisco Call Manager, and you want to be able to just import a list of your hunt pilots and the member end users or devices that are associated to that hunt pilot. Makes it super easy. You're just entering in those hunt pilots separated by comma. So maybe that's 3, 5, 6, 7 and 5, 6, 7, 8 and 8, 9, 2, 3. All right. I just do a quick import now, and QLive is going to use an Axle connection and pull in all those member users into QLive and then synchronize them whenever you add a user to the hunt pilot in the PBX. All right, so again, that can be a very useful feature here because it speeds up the installation time and it makes QLive easier to maintain. All you need to know is the hunt pilots you want to monitor. You can also use a combination of entering in your hunt pilots, right, and setting up groups. These groups do not have to be hunt groups, or they do not have to be hunt pilots. For example, you can just create a group. Maybe I want to create a group called my outside sales team or my renewals team. Right? And that outside sales team is not part of a hunt group, but I do want to track their activity as a group from reports. So again, I can add whatever group I'd like and just leave the extension as null. This extension is the Hunt Group extension or the Hunt Pilot. Okay. As soon as you create that group, you can add other agents to the group manually. All right, so initially I showed where that can be automated by entering in the Hunt Pilot. You can also add users to the group manually here by just clicking Add and then selecting which agents should be associated to this accounting group. Okay, so that's setting up groups. Also creating new agents. So under Assign here, you'll notice I have 16 different agents configured within QLive. If I needed to add a new agent, I just simply go down to the bottom of the screen and I click Add. I would simply enter in their name, all right, their alias, this alias being their URI or whatever the name of that is associated to that directory number or extension in your PBX. So again, very important making sure that that alias is correct. All right. Also the extension. All right. So whatever extension that agent or that extension that device is associated to. You also have an email, which can be very useful when we're setting up alarms to just email to a favorite. You can upload a photo so supervisors can see a picture of the agent, and then you can associate them to a group. Again, does not have to be a Hunt group. I just called this Hunt group, which can be user defined. Maybe you want to call this Hunt Pilot or Hunt List. Just for simplicity for this demonstration and training today, I renamed the group to Hunt Group. But again, this could just be a group that's not a Hunt group. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I simply click Active. All right. As soon as I click Active, that does take into consideration the number of named users that you're licensed for. So QLive being on a named active user or agent basis, if I had 17 a license for 17 agents, you'll see that I have 16. I could only add one more. I wouldn't want to try and add a couple more or the software would error, and that would be maybe a good time to contact your reseller or your Metropolis account manager to add other agents. All right, we can grow with you as you add agents to QLive. Also, you'll notice that I can edit a specific user. I can delete a specific user. All right, and I can go toggle from screen to screen as I add multiple users or hundreds of users. I can also import your user list as a CSV file. So this can make it really easy. It's just a comma delimited file with the name, the alias, the extension, the email, the site, and so on. So again, if you would like the import or the import template, please don't hesitate to contact our support team and they can email you one. Otherwise, again, it's just a comma separated file that you can create in Excel with these column headers. Okay, so those are agents. I also wanted to discuss how to set up your or to gain access to help or support. So Metropolis, we do act as first tier support. So regardless of whether or not you purchase this software through a reseller, you can contact Metropolis directly. The best way to reach us would be via telephone or email. All right, telephone number being 954-414-2900. And you can hit extension 32. That'll direct you directly to our technical support team, or you can follow the prompts for technical support or after-hours support. Okay, so again, that's help here. I also have the ability to log out. All right, so those are some of the just basic configuration options here. I also have the ability as a supervisor or as an administrator to see what a supervisor could monitor. So let's just say this is Joe Smith. He's the master supervisor for all of your groups, right? So he or she's monitoring accounting, customer service, marketing, renewals, sales, and support. I'm going to refer to these as different dashboards. Within a dashboard, you have a widget, all right? So this total is part of a widget. And then you also have gauges within the widget. So if I look at the abandoned phone calls across the aggregate total of the groups that are selected, you'll notice I can simply drill down on those very simply. Right, so maybe the supervisor wants to make sure, hey, did you really call back this 5547 number? That could be a lost opportunity. Or maybe you're curious on just handled calls. Or maybe you are making a bunch of outbound calls you don't even care about inbound or abandoned calls. The supervisor can modify the gauge based on what's relevant to their group that they're monitoring. There's also the ability to see the distribution of calls. Again, I titled this Hunt Group, but that could be a little misleading, right? Because a group can be associated to users or agents that are making outbound calls. Hence the reason you see the distribution of calls being inbound, outbound, internal, transferred, and conference. If I had selected, you may remember, that option in settings to where I said inbound through the group only, then I wouldn't see any outbound calls here, and these would be just calls that came in through the Hunt group or the Hunt pilot. So if that's how you envision purchasing QLive or using QLive, really is that informal call center from the inbound perspective on number of calls coming in to a Hunt group, then I would again suggest enabling that feature. There's also something called group statistics or KPIs, right? You'll see these are dynamically changing. It just went from 29 to 31% abandonment rate across the aggregate total of groups that are selected. I'm meeting my service level. That's great. Maybe remember I set that up at 20 seconds of answer time. So all of my calls have been answered within 20 seconds. My average speed of answer being 5 seconds per call. My longest call in queue being 15 seconds. Hence the reason I haven't exceeded my service level or not met my service level. What's my average handle time per call? I can see across all groups, 2 minutes and 59 seconds. What's my average queue time or native queue time? Maybe I don't need any of those statistics here. I want to choose something else, like the transfer rate. How many calls are transferred? Or maybe I want to choose the longest calls that are waiting in queue, or unanswered calls in queue. So again, very useful statistics at your fingertips. Do notice that when it says only 9 stats can be selected, right? So if you were to choose 10 stats, the software would error. So pick the 9 that are the most relevant to your business. All right, or to your group as a supervisor. There's also something called agent activity summary. So you'll notice that across these groups that are selected, that I have 10 agents logged in, 0 agents logged out, no agents in a D&D on status. What does that mean? Do not disturb. So a lot of times on a phone system, maybe you have a SAC event, or you have a D&D event, or on your soft phone or Jabber phone, and do not disturb. It looks like none of my agents are avoiding calls in a do not disturb status. How many are available are also idle, all right? Dialing, ringing, talking, and so on. These agent activity summary statistics, just like everything within QLive, can be modified based on what's relevant for the supervisor to see. So that's just one of the 5 tabs at the supervisor fingertips. If I wanted to minimize this tab and look at active calls, let's discuss what this means. Because I have 5 groups selected and an auto attendant, I can track calls in real time as they're delivered through the auto attendant. So I have a 3 second, 5 second, 7 second, so 2.5 second refresh rate from this calling party or this caller ID. So someone calling in with an 877 phone number. As that call goes through maybe some key presses and somebody enters in maybe sales. Maybe I'll get lucky. No, customer service. So someone entered in customer service. Now that call is ringing the customer service group, all right, or the customer service queue, all right, whether or not that's a broadcast. So a lot of times customers will set up a Hunt group or Hunt pilot to broadcast to all phones, or maybe it's a top-down distribution. So it's ringing each one of your agents. So they have an equal distribution of calls, or also known as round robin. Maybe you have a longest idle method that you're set up, or possibly a queue. So again, regardless of what your configuration is for your hunt groups, Metropolis is going to monitor and report that. So this call's been in that group for a long time. This is going to fall outside of my SLA. I know it is. Okay. So now this call turns into an active call. So I see that I have 3 outbound calls that are taking place in that 1 inbound call. Thank gosh, we got it. Miss Lowen picked it up. And now she's talking to possibly a little angry customer because they sat on hold for so long. All right, so this can be, again, very important in monitoring in real time what's taking place as calls flow in and out. Another tab that's important is agent status, right? Extremely important. Maybe one of the main reasons you purchased QLive, right? What are your agents doing? Well, if we look at customer service, Miss Lowen's talking. She's been on an inbound call for 44 seconds. But what is Miss Smiley doing? She's been idle or available for 29 minutes and 47 seconds. Hopefully, she's following up on emails or conducting business. Otherwise, maybe she's goofing off and doing something she's not supposed to. Or maybe you're troubleshooting and you want to change the way that you take advantage of idle time. Maybe this is a PBX configuration problem. A call should be routed to Miss Smiley because she's been idle for so long. We find that all the time customers will adopt QLive and they'll change their configuration of their PBX or their hunt groups to optimize them better. Some other statuses that would display here would be do not disturb, unavailable, hunt ringing, voicemail. So these are all dynamically changing depending on the event that takes place. Right? I can always minimize these different groups so I can just see what's relevant. I can also drag and drop these columns to other areas or eliminate them entirely. Let's go to the next column here, or the next tab here, as this one's another very important tab for a supervisor to monitor daily activity. So as you'll notice on the ribbon here, I have agent, I have total calls. So maybe you're curious who's made or received the most calls over the course of day. That's Mr. Kent crushing it, 277. Don't know how he's doing it. Who's answering the most calls? Well, looks like Miss Lowen, 28. All right, so she's paying close adherence to the phone. She's also making a lot of outbound calls. Who's putting customers on hold for the longest periods of time? That's what a lot of people are looking for. Supervisors are looking for, right? Looks like Mr. Kent, 12 seconds. He might be one of those agents that just answers the phone, puts customers on hold, and just lets them drop off the call. So he's looking really good if you're ranking his productivity based on no abandoned calls, but he's trying to beat the system by putting them on hold. All right. Also, average ring time. All right. So what's your average ring time per call? And these settings, again, can be, just like everything in QLive, modified based on what's relevant. So maybe you're just curious on incoming calls, or maybe I'm curious on internal calls, or outbound calls, or available time and talking time, and so on. So pick the columns that are relevant, drag and drop them in the appropriate place. Maybe throw this supervisor dashboard on a wallboard. I've seen a lot of things out there. Again, it's one of the beautiful parts about QLive. It's very flexible. Finally, there's something called alerts. Let's see. Oh, no alerts have gone off. Well, I guess that's a good thing if you're a supervisor. Or maybe you need to tighten your thresholds on what can trigger the alarms. How the alarms are configured, or alerts to be more specific, is you go to the ribbon and you click on something called KPI alerts. So as you'll see, under KPI alerts, I have the ability to define which groups can trigger the alarm and what threshold or what KPI. So I'm going to select maybe customer service. I really want to make sure my customer service team is answering all inbound calls. Last thing I want is an upset customer saying they can't get in touch with customer service. So maybe this is average speed of answer greater than 10 seconds, right? So that's the name. The description, I could say average speed of answer greater than 10 seconds from within the customer service department. Here is where I'm setting up that threshold. So one of them being the speed of answer, right? So average speed of answer more than 15 seconds. And get that 45-second call in there that I let go when I set the simulator, right? So this would have triggered off that alarm there. Or maybe I want an alarm if I'm not meeting my service level. So less than 80% of calls are answered within 20 seconds. Send me an email. Send the supervisor an email, or send everybody an email in the entire group. That's one of the reasons you have the favorites there. Let them know, okay, this is not good. All right. Or maybe you want to set up an alarm on the available agents. So if you have less than one available agent, or maybe you have 0 agents available in a group, maybe it's time to add more agents, find more resources, or maybe set up your calls to make sure they're overflowing, right, to other groups. The last thing you want is a missed opportunity. Okay, so again, lots of different options on setting up these thresholds. You can find many of them as you'd like. Another one that's popular is abandoned calls. So maybe you want an email every time there's an abandoned call, right? So again, that can be useful. Emailing you not only the abandoned call in the group, but the calling party, so you can quickly call them back, or the caller ID. When should that alert take place? Maybe it's just your busy hour. You need to focus on maybe your lunch scheduling. You're working on putting together your forecast and your schedule for the week. And just between the hours of 11 and 1, you want to make sure you have available agents. Or maybe just on the weekdays. You don't care about the weekends because you don't have any employees answering calls on the weekends because they're not working. Or maybe you do, so you want to include weekends as well. All right, so what are the options for delivery? Well, you have a pop-up notification to the supervisor that I just showed. All right, you also can send out an email notification, so combination. You can do pop-up and email, and then list the email addresses that pop-up should go to, or that email notification should go to. All right, so maybe that's everybody within the customer service group. And how do you want that alert, meaning that screen pop, to be delivered? Is it just alerting one time, or is it alerting continuously until acknowledged? And why would I use once versus continuously? Well, maybe you're going out, you're a supervisor, and you're going to take your lunch break, and when you log back into QLive, when you get back into the office, you want to see all the times these thresholds had been broken. All right, you don't want to have to pull a report, which you could. You could actually have a scheduled report sent to you every day, every hour, every 5 minutes. You could also scroll down to the bottom of the screen where I showed a log of the alerts. But if you set up alert continuously until acknowledged, there's going to be a red banner on the top of the supervisor's screen where they have to click on the red banner and acknowledge all the times that I didn't have enough agents within the group, or I had too many abandoned phone calls. And that can be really important, right? Because last thing you want is to fall outside of these adherences or thresholds that you'd configured. You can also come here to alerts, and I had a couple that are set up. So 10-second average speed of answer for sales. So if a call were to come into the sales group or the sales hunt group, and it were to ring more than 10 seconds, then I would provide, or the QLive software would provide that pop-up in email. Or if I don't have any agents that are available, all right, then I also want to send an alert, because last thing I want, you don't have sales reps that are available answering calls. Well, maybe those potential opportunities are going to go elsewhere because they're just going to voicemail or customers hanging up. All right, so alerts, very useful for proactively notifying you without having to stare at a dashboard or pull a report or schedule a report. So supervisor has the ability to set up alarms, all right? Alarms just based on their permission type, all right, or their user. There's also the supervisor has the ability to pull reports, which we'll go into in a little bit. The supervisor will only be able to pull reports based on the groups that are selected. There's also a wallboard user. All right, so wallboard being very convenient, very nice. Maybe you want to put up a monitor on the sales floor and run some competitions in the office. Maybe you, based on call volume, outbound call volume, or maybe you have a technical support team and you want them to be able to know, how many calls are waiting in queue. All right, so how many calls are waiting in queue, or how many calls are in the auto attendant. So I know to wrap up my call and get to the next customer. All right, or am I meeting the guidelines that were provided by my supervisor as a team, right? So what's my average queue time? What's the group's average speed of answer, and so on. Just like the supervisor dashboard, all of these different gauges and the gauges within the widget can be modified based on what's relevant for this layout. So again, I pick and choose maybe average available time or the answered calls. As soon as I do that, I click save so I can go back to it in the future and not have to reconfigure or re-choose which gauges are important for this wallboard. I can also minimize this tab here, KPIs, and choose call volume. All right, this might be important, right? Maybe you're going to do call volume by day of week. Maybe you're going to be doing call volume for just the day or the day of the month. Again, pick and choose your X and Y axis. If I'm looking here, it looks like, oh, Friday, high call volume. Maybe I don't want to, if I'm looking at this from a forecasting perspective, maybe I don't want to approve time off for my agents on Fridays, even though they really want to, because there's so many calls that are coming in. Or maybe I want to have an idea on which groups are performing better than others. Well, that's simple. Look down here. I have accounting crushing it. If you're ranking outbound calls as the criteria for crushing it. Or maybe you're curious on which groups are abandoning more phone calls than others. All right. And these groups, remember, they don't have to be like these are like department names, right? Maybe your groups are branches, right? So each group is a branch and you want to know which branch is under or overperforming. Or maybe your groups are teams, right? You have several different teams, sales teams spread out across different regions, and you want to know, okay, which sales teams are being the most productive and model their call volume after the productive sales teams that are making those calls and producing revenue. So again, a lot of options on however you want to run your business that you can derive out of these analytics. Another way that you can display group statistics is a group matrix report, or group matrix wallboard to be more specific. So you now have a tabular view on those 6 groups that are selected. So I can see, which groups are abandoning the most phone calls or not meeting my SLA or having the most talk time or having the smallest speed of answer, or shortest speed of answer. I can also pick and choose the statistics that are relevant. So again, maybe average speed of answer is not important. I can also change the color. So I don't want accounting to be red. I want accounting to be green. Money. Okay, so again, pick and choose the color that's important to you. On the bottom here, you can modify the gauge, but I have total number of agents. All right, so it looks like most of my agents are currently in the sales group. Total number of calls. It looks like the customer service. Actually, this is support. This is the green here, support. It's making more calls or receiving more calls than other groups there. Offered calls. It looks like I have the support group being offered the most calls. Again, I can modify these different gauges based on what's relevant. There's also a layout called agent performance, right? So this is low level agent, right? So how this is most frequently used is, and how you can really utilize QLive to make your employees or make your call center more productive is embrace something called gamification. or competitions in the office to win prizes or some sort of accolade. So, example, I have a Hall of Fame set up here for Mr. Kent. Looks like he's made 288 calls and leading the other agents within the group. So he's likely going to win that prize if you're ranking calls based on total calls, or maybe it's just dialed calls, meaning outbound, so you have an outbound call center, or answered calls if they're inbound calls, or talking duration. Maybe you want to rotate the competition every once in a while, right? Maybe talking duration is really important. You want your agents to start building that relationship with your customers or prospects. You also have Hall of Shame. Not to necessarily shame anybody. You can change these names, as you saw, to something maybe a little bit less derogatory, or maybe you leave it as Hall of Shame because they need to pick it up. So you have options on changing the name of the Hall of Fame and Hall of Shame. You can also change the scrolling marquee. Maybe you're making an announcement that 12 o'clock today, we're going to have early lunch, and boss is paying for it, and everybody get excited. Or maybe it's a competition that's coming up. Get ready, 2 o'clock, you're hitting the phones, power hour. Whoever makes the most calls is going to win a freaking BMW. Whoever gets second place, set of steak knives, last place, don't ever want to be last place. You can also see what the agent status is. So again, this could be really useful in noticing, okay, why is my entire team in idle status? Like, come on, pick up the phones. I know as an owner of a business, you might sit there, wondering, what are my employees doing? Well, if you can just take a look up at the wallboard and see green, that's not necessarily a good thing. All right, so that's the third layout. Finally, there's a layout that is specific to UCCX, which is Cisco Unified Contact Center Express, and they're related to CSQs. So if you don't have contact center, that's great. Everything I've shown you thus far is just PBX related for Cisco Call Manager or Avaya, whatever PBX you have. This is just for Cisco Contact Center. The beautiful part of UCCX Wallboards, if you purchase the module and you have UCCX again, is you don't need finesse, and you can display information on contact center service queues to see who's logged in, how many agents are ready, how many agents are not ready, how many are talking, and dynamically changing. It's a different data source than or we're collecting data directly from the UCCX to derive these statistics. And I know it's one of the gaps in the Cisco Contact Center portfolio there, again, is providing Wallboards. So again, you have one pane of glass to report on not just your general end users, right? If we're talking like a Cisco phone system, for example, but also your contact center, one solution. All right. Also, there's something called agent. All right, so your agents can log into QLive as well and see what their statistics are over the course of the day. Now, it's really important for me, being in a sales profession part of my life, being technical part of my life, but knowing, hey, I've got a customer that called in. I need to call them back, right? So just drilling down on my missed calls and making that quick call back. Or I've been told, okay, I need to make X amount of phone calls a day, and it's noon, and I haven't come anywhere close to the amount of calls I need. I need to start picking up the phone. All right, so again, I have the gauges that I can see here. You can also see my current status, some useful statistics. So are you sitting down with your agents and setting goals for them? Are you stating that, hey, you can't have more than a 5% abandonment rate? And how are you measuring that today? Well, now you can with QLive, and the agent can see it. All right, how many missed phone calls? What's your total call duration? Maybe that's really important for you to measure over the course of the day. Or hold time, right? We've already talked about Mr. Kent, 13 seconds. I think he might be doing something a little squirrely, answering those calls to avoid that 0% abandonment rate, or to hit that 0% abandonment rate. You can really use QLive to tone down on those kind of behaviors. Also looking at Mr. Kent's time spent. Wow, 94% of the time spent in an available or idle status. That is a lot of time. All right, so maybe something's going on there. Also very useful here would be a bar chart showing other agents within the group and how well they're performing. So Miss Nold logs in and sees, oh my gosh, I've missed 8 calls. Nobody else in the group has missed any. Well, I need to pay closer adherence to the phone. Otherwise, I'm going to get reprimanded. Or maybe it's outbound calls. Mr. Kent's saying, okay, yeah, I'm crushing it. I'm making my 228 outbound calls. All right. Or maybe it's Miss Diaz saying, oh, I need to pick up my call volume. Mr. Kent's crushing it again. He continues to hit his numbers. And this is why he's hitting his numbers, because he's making those calls. Makes sense now. So, having those tools at your fingertips in order to make those decisions, not only as a supervisor, but also an agent, very important for your business. This dashboard also can tie into a CRM. All right, so it's an additional module to QLive, but if you have, for example, maybe Salesforce, right, what the agent dashboard can do is, based on the calling party or the caller ID, it can pop that associated record in Salesforce to save your agent some time. All right, so I know that's how we use it here at Metropolis. We have a call come in. We can make a note immediately on that call and then follow up on that opportunity the next time they call in. It's also kind of nice when you see someone calling in and you know the account history, so you can speak a little bit more intelligently right away instead of being like, oh, hey, John, what are you calling about? So again, just keep in mind, if you do have a CRM and want to tie that into QLive, do reach out to your reseller or account manager. And it ties into this, again, agent dashboard. So you have supervisor, you have agent, you have wallboard. What are we missing? We're missing reporting. All right, but very important feature of QLive are our historical reports, since everything else I showed you today is live. All right, so who can pull reports? Well, an agent. All right, so Mr. Kent can pull calls on just his calls over the course of the day, or since the production use of QLive here. All right, so maybe he wants to see, okay, I've started to make more calls and I'm starting to hit my numbers and it's making sense. Or maybe it's customer service. Someone's calling in and you missed that call yesterday and you're like, oh my gosh, what was that number? I really need to figure it out. Well, if the agent can just pull it up and call them back. All right, so again, agents have report. You also have the supervisor, right? So supervisor can pull reports based on whatever groups that supervisor had selected. And then obviously the administrator can pull reports. To get to reports, pretty simple. Go to the ribbon, click on reports. There's also that scheduling option too. So reports can be pulled ad hoc, all right, meaning you're pulling them one time. They can also be set to deliver on a schedule. All right. There's many different templates and various categories that are available. Also, the ability to customize reports should you need to make any changes or design a report that's very specific to your business needs. But we try to encompass all of them in the templates just to make things easier for you and standardize them, as we've worked with customers for many years. Choosing what reports matter to them, as those reports might matter to your business immediately, so you're not trying to guess what's important. So let's go through a few of them. This is a very simple report. So agent call detail. Okay, the parameters that are available within the agent call detail, you can choose to filter by group. So I'll just choose all my groups. I'm automatically going to select all my agents. I think I'm missing maybe a few agents in there. Yeah. And then I want to choose the date and time range. So this is all calls from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. All right. Notice there's also an option to show agents with no calls in the report. That can be really important. Noticing, okay, who didn't make any calls today. You have your to and your from. So this is all calls from the beginning to end of day using military time. That's how all of our solutions work in Metropolis. It's based on military time here. You can filter by direction, so all incoming outgoing or internal. I'm just going to select all here. And maybe you just want to filter by calls that are over 18 seconds that are outbound, right? Because you have some sales reps that are making 15-second calls just to rack up their call count, and that shouldn't count as a call. So just filter out calls more than 18 seconds. All right. Or maybe calls that are less than 3 seconds, right? Is that Mr. Kent? That's probably Mr. Kent, right? Picking up the phone, hanging up on the customer, trying to avoid those abandoned calls. I can't hide from QLive. All right, so you have the ability to choose a report name, also a report format. Notice that HTML, PDF, and CSV are options. How do you want to see that report? Well, you can pull it to the screen. So again, pulling in the browser as an HTML file. I could save it as a file. So save it as a CSV file to the local machine. Or maybe I want to email it one time out through QLive. All right, so again, 3 different options. I'm just going to choose pull to screen. And maybe I want to include a graph. Yeah, really want to include a graph. And I have options for pie chart, donut, column, and horizontal bar. A lot of options that are available. And maybe I even want to choose recording. So take a step back, recording. So recording is not included with QLive. It is an additional module. If you would like the audio of a call recorded and linked to a report, such as this agent call detail report, please contact your account manager or your reseller for a quote to add the recording module to QLive. Right. So here I'm going to just run this detail report and all calls 0 seconds. Microsoft Edge tried to block this report. Like Microsoft Edge. But do notice, I don't know if you saw the bottom of my screen there, but it had a pop-up notification. All right, so I had to allow it. Also on the top of the screen sometimes, maybe it's the first time that you've used QLive, allow the pop-up, all right, and then refresh the page so you can pull the report. A lot of times customers call and say, oh my gosh, I can't pull the report. Well, just allow pop-ups on that page for you to pull the report. Okay, so back to this agent call detail. So this would be the distribution of calls amongst the group or the agents that are selected. I can see breakdown by agent. So Miss Nold, how many total calls, inbound, outbound, internal, talking duration, and so on. These are the individual calls. All right, so it looks like she called this 1555 number. And what did she talk about for 2 minutes and 30 seconds? That's not that suspicious. Internal call. It's not that bad. Look for maybe like a 3-second call. But again, play the recording if you're wondering what that behavior is. So again, just seamless. Audio is playing through my speakers here or through your headset, however you set up your audio here. And then I'm going to stop it. So any of those recordings, again, I can just simply play. What are some of the other reports that are important? Maybe you want to pull this report in summary fashion. Or maybe I'm curious on longest hold times. Or maybe I want a stats report. Right? What are stats? Well, we can see a lot of detailed analytics with this stats report. So I'm just going to choose maybe the sales department. And I want to choose maybe a graph. I like graphs. Maybe a pie chart. And then I'm going to pull this report to the screen. And I need to go to always allow. Do you see that too? I went to allow once. Need to go to always allow. Okay. I can see here that Miss Nold. All right. How many inbound, outbound calls, and so on. Nice pie chart distribution. How many total calls? How many of those were incoming? How many of those were outgoing? How many of those were answered? How many of those were missed? And how many of them were abandoned? All right. I have my average hold time. So, wow, Mr. Kent or Miss Nold not abandoning or not putting customers on hold, but man, she's abandoning a lot of calls. Mr. Kent, it's going to be my culprit. Looks like average hold time of 13 seconds. Hasn't missed any calls, but he's abandoning calls too. He has missed 8 calls as well today. All right, so abandoning meaning, based on my definition, I think I set it up to either ringing directly to the agent or ringing through the hunt group. So again, customized abandoned phone calls as needed. I always get the question asked, what's the difference between a missed call and an abandoned phone call? Well, an abandoned phone call means the customer hung up. A missed call means that it was missed by I don't like to use the same word to describe the definition of something. But a missed call is where a call goes to voicemail or a call is not answered, but the customer didn't hang up, right? So again, no calls went to voicemail or no calls were twinned and forwarded to, Mr. Kent's cell phone, right? Miss Lowen, again, nice breakdown on activity in a stats fashion. Always get questions asked on an agent daily summary report. This is a really good one too. And maybe it's going to be over a couple days, right? So you've sat down with Mr. Kent yesterday. See, bottom of the screen, important. Microsoft Edge blocked a pop-up from qdashboards.com. Do I want to allow once or always allow? I'm going to always allow, so I don't have to go through this again. So this pops up on my screen, and I can see I chose 2 days. I could have chose the whole week, but over those 2 days, Mr. Kent's calls all came in through the Hunt group. All right, so these are non-direct calls. These are the amount of calls that were delivered directly to their DID. So maybe you've set up your PBX, your phone system, to where your agents or your users, maybe not necessarily an agent, they're just a business user, hasn't received any calls through DID, all through the Hunt pilot or Hunt group. All right, what's your total duration? How many outbound calls? What are your abandoned calls, answered calls, and missed calls? So what is, again, the use case of this report? Well, maybe you sat down with Mr. Kent earlier in the week and said, okay, it's unacceptable for you to miss, so many calls. And I want to see you pay closer adherence to the phone, or, that's going to be your last strike. So you're seeing, okay, it's getting better. He went from 37 missed calls to eight missed calls. That's 300% improvement. Good job. So again, it can be really useful if you're going to break this down by day of week, or by weekly summary, or even monthly summary if you want to see trends over time or trends over quarter. How many agents are putting calls on Park. You also have your agent summary report, so agent activity detail, agent activity summary. What you can do here is maybe you just want to filter by calls that or events like talking. I want to know how long they've been talking, how long they've been dialing. Are they letting phones ring for too long? I also want to know, Hunt ringing too. So not just calls that are ringing directly to their DID, but also through the Hunt group. I want to know if they're putting their phone on Do Not Disturb. Yes, absolutely. Possibly unavailable. Are they putting their phone on second? Absolutely available. Like, are they sitting idle for a long time? So I'm going to filter by those activities, and I am going to include a graph, and I'm going to see what's going on with Mr. Kent. All right, so how's Mr. Kent doing? Well, if I run this report and pops up on my screen, and I could see, okay, Mr. Kent, what's he doing? All right, so again, I have the breakdown where it looks like most of the time for Mr. Kent is spent in this talking status. That's good. At least it's talking, it's not available. So again, filtering by event and showing summary or detail. All right, so detail, very similar to summary, would show all the times that an event takes place. Maybe that's log in, maybe it's log out, maybe it's do not disturb, maybe it's unavailable. So you could use QLive as your time clock, right? So when are they logging in the morning, when are they logging out? Or again, that unavailable always comes back, or the do not disturb always comes back. We have so many abandoned phone calls. It's because your employees are putting their phone on do not disturb and going on Facebook. All right, so again, you have your agent activity detail. You can just filter automatic filters by unavailable, log in and log out, and so on. Now, the group reports. Right, so again, I minimize these, and let's drill down on group. So I have a group called detail, a group called summary. All right, so these are calls that just went to the group. And then I have a group abandoned calls. That's huge. Last thing you want are calls to be abandoned within a group without one of the users or agents answering them. Or group performance detail. let's do a group performance detail. So what are we doing here? So I can choose sales or whatever group I'd like. And then I want to show only calls that came in through the hunt group. Yes, I don't care about just calls that went to their DID. All I care about is calls that went to the hunt group. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to filter out those direct calls. Include overlapping calls in the group totals. Oh, overlapping calls. That's the mirroring, right? So do I want to include internal calls in my total call count? No, I don't want to include internal calls. I just want to know how many times customers are calling in and we're not answering the phone, right? So I left just show calls to the group. And I'm just going to choose that one group here, just calls over the course of the day, and I'm going to run the report. See what happens. Oh, looks like in the sales group, I can see that Mr. Kent answered more calls than Miss Nold by 6. All right, so again, inbound calls, none of the calls being abandoned. And then I can also see some other useful metrics like the answer time. All right, I could also see the talk time, and the max talked 44 minutes. Oh my gosh. Now that's why his talk time so high. He had one call that was 44 minutes. What's my average speed of answer? Okay, it looks like 4 seconds compared to 11. So Mr. Kent's, he's all over picking up that phone. I know he doesn't want any of those abandoned calls. All right, so again, nice report on agent performance, or maybe overflow, right? Maybe this is something that you want to pull a report on frequently. Or parked calls. I don't have an overflow identifier here, so this is important. So if you looked here, it actually came up with the error. Unknown column overflow to in where clause. All right, so it's notifying you that you don't have an overflow hunt group set up. All right, so again, that's something that we can do. We just need to know how your call algorithm is set up. Which hunt groups or hunt pilots are overflow, and which of the hunt pilots or hunt groups are initially called. So again, we can report on just calls or how many calls overflow to those overflow groups. Okay, so very important report. One of the most highly used reports as well. You also have reports on peak call volume. All right, so peak call volume, huge, right? So what's your busy hour? Well, I could go to missed call peak report. I could run this report to the screen. And I want to include a graph on this one. So I'm going to choose a line graph. And I'm going to run the report. And okay, now I know. Now I know how to schedule my workforce. 1 and 2 o'clock, no more lunch breaks. All right, that's where we're getting most of my calls. All right, but it looks like, throughout the course of the day, kind of even, 3 calls a day. More important would be, when are your phone calls missed? Right? If you notice a bunch of missed phone calls at 12 o'clock, maybe, again, you want to stagger your workforce more efficiently, or pull this report from a forecasting perspective. So you go back and look at the last time we ran that commercial on television. We had an influx of calls on Sunday, and most of those calls came in the morning because people really wanted to buy our service. So let's make sure that we have enough employees to answer our 50 calls that came in at between 2 or 3, or 200 or 2,000 calls that came in between 2 and 3. Right? So again, very easy to pull a graph into the report. You also have your native queues, all right, or queues depending on your PBX. All right, your KPI snapshot. So how many times are you outside of adherence from the summary or snapshot perspective? Or not outside of adherence, but whenever a KPI threshold were to break, you have a snapshot and summary view. Also, DNIS reports. So DNIS detail, DNIS summary. Where do these reports really come into play with DNIS, right? Maybe you have branches and you want to know which branches are getting the most phone calls. Another very important use case would be you're running marketing campaigns, your car dealer, right? And you spend all this money on AdWords and trade show magazines and publications and white papers, and you have a specific phone number that the customer is calling, so you can track how that ad campaign is running. So Again, call volume by branch, call volume by DNS for marketing, or you're an outsourced call center and you're accepting calls from various customers, and each one of those customers has a different DNS. So you need to track how many times each one of those customers are calling in from a billing perspective, but also knowing their account, right? One of the most popular use cases of a call center application, right, is taking those overflow calls from a business that can't handle them and knowing when they're calling in because they're calling a specific DNS. You also have the ability to report on frequently received and frequently dialed calls. So frequently received can be really useful. Maybe you just want to know, and maybe summary, what's the most frequently received number? Wow, 48 calls coming in from this 555 number. That could be a robodial, right? Tying up your phone lines. It could be personal calls being made by a particular, well, these are received. So likely these are harassing calls or really upset customer. We can drill down on this. So I'm going to do a control and copy this. Let's see what happened here. Cortana, read aloud. No, thank you. Also have from the outbound perspective, right? So maybe you have a sales rep, or sales team, and they continue to call the same phone numbers over and over again. You can identify that behavior from a frequently dialed summary report, right? So you pull that report and see, okay, we're calling this 555 number 87 times. That's got to be somebody's grandma or boyfriend or some made up number or number that they're just calling to make their numbers higher in terms of call count. So yeah, very useful from outbound perspective. Call handler reports. So if you have a Cisco phone system, you have Unity, and likely you have call handlers and different key presses and menus, and you want to know what's your call volume by call handler or abandonment rate by call handler. Again, we just pull a call summary report and we can see the main directory. Again, like the directory phone book, right? How many calls came in, how many were abandoned, how many were hung up, how many total, how many went to the main line, and then possibly, you pressed one and it went to a different call handler or to a different branch. So again, call volume in summary. We can also do call volume in detail or call handler in detail as well. You also have your offsite transfer report. So how many, not to be, it's very similar to overflow, right? So you may remember I had that group overflow summary, but that's an overflow report from one hunt group to another hunt group within the business. But offsite is transferred to a DID. That offsite number, maybe it's a employee cell phone that's taking after hours support calls, or maybe that offsite transfer number is your call center, right? We discussed several use cases of that offsite number. We can monitor those. Now, I know we've gone about an hour into our training here, saving the best for last. So cradle to grave. Always get that question asked. Show me the life cycle of the call. I want to know everything that had happened throughout the call here. Well, here are the different filtering parameters. Could be by agent, could be by group, or it could be by number. Right? I'm going to put a number here, and I'm going to paste that number here because it called way too many calls from that number. The date and time, just going to choose segment today. Maybe just, all calls. Do a quick search, drill down on one of these. We can see, okay, when they're calling in, what's happening. So looks like it's ringing, auto attendant, hunt ringing, and talks. They are talking to somebody. Wow. Maybe not a robot dialer. Maybe it's just a simulator. All right. So you have, again, the ability to report on inbound calls, outbound, and internal as filter. But maybe you also want to filter by event. Right? Look at all these events. So just show me where there are transfers. Just show me where there's abandons, hold times, queue times, calls going to voicemail. When are people putting customers on park? Or when are calls being rolled over off-site? Or what are the key presses that are entered into your IVR or to your auto attendant? And do you need to optimize your auto attendant because you're getting so many calls before an agent even has an opportunity to answer the call? This is where you can maximize or realize revenue or return on investment on a product like QLive. So example being, how many times is 1, then 2, then 5 dialed? Maybe that's to branch XYZ, to the sales department, and to the refinancing division. Well, you lost a few refinancing calls, so you want to do that search by the auto attendant key presses. So again, you can filter by auto attendant path or partial auto attendant path. So again, maybe just the times 1 and 2 were entered, or as long as your auto attendants are, I've seen extremely complicated auto attendants or menu options there. Okay. So again, lots of different filters. Oh, I did want to show one report, like hold times. One of the most frequently asked reports here would be hold time. It's just that number. There's no hold times from this phone number here. So I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to go to agents, all agents. So any agents have hold time here. What is going on? Search hold time. So this is another good example. Okay, why isn't this pulling a report for me? Right now I'm running a simulator, and I made several changes before I did training today. A good way to resolve this issue: 1, contact Metropolis support, or I like to kind of figure out how to do things on my own. I just go back to maybe report generator and go back to the report and try and pull it again, right? So cradle to grave, and then I'm going to go what I do, inbound calls, and then I went to hold time, and then I'm going to pull this report again. Yeah. So again, that seemed to have resolved the issue. And here I can see exactly what happened over the life cycle of each one of these calls when I drill down. So auto attendant, what were the options entered in the auto attendant? Then the call went to Mr. Kent. Mr. Kent talked to customer for 24 seconds, put the customer on hold, did a warm transfer. Miss Smiley picked up the phone. She talked to customer for 29 seconds, and then she disconnected the phone call, not the customer. Really important. Whatever business policies or policies you put in place to your agents, maybe they're not allowed to hang up the phone. You have to wait for the customer to hang up the phone, right? So again, entire life cycle of a call from cradle to grave. Finally, there is a report called custom, or a custom report option. So if you didn't like any of those templates, you can really drill down on what's relevant to you with many conditions, right? So maybe I want this on the agent level, and I want a detail report. What columns do I want to include? Agent, group, date, time, calling party, receiving party, duration. Kind of boring, but get the picture. Again, you're pulling in the columns that are important. You can many more options here. But this is where it gets interesting. Do I want the calling party to equal a partial number, or do I want it to not equal a number? Or again, this is a way that you can just pull up a dial number detail to prove a call wasn't made or received. Or you want another condition here, like calling party equals a certain number and the agent equals a certain agent, and also the direction equals inbound, and the durations over 10 seconds. You get the picture. You're building your query without having to know SQL, and then you can pick and choose the report types. So again, maybe I want to include abandoned calls, transferred calls. How do I want to sort them and order them? So I'm sorting these by agent name in ascending order. How do I want to group them? Do I want to group them by agent? Do I want to display that pie chart? And do I want to include that reporting? So I can submit, and this is what that report will look like. So again, I have that custom report that I created. I really like it, and I want to email it.